y'all doing? Y'all good?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning,
Good
Professor.
morning.
Morning.
What's the word? How was y'all weekend?
It was
It's good.
Sounds like an
It
amazing.
was good.
I mean, yeah.
All right.
You sound static,
Really good.
staticky.
I sound staticky.
It's,
Yeah.
I still sound staticky.
nah.
Nah.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, it's getting better.
Cool. Well, hope everybody had a decent week or weekend. I know obviously there's not so much one can do, obviously under the circumstances, and you know what I'm saying, just trying to make the best out of the overall situation. But pretty much, I know there's been like more news in regards to like, you know, what's been happening around police, like Breonna Taylor. I just seen that there was apparently a new case that they showed like within the last 24 hours where a man was under the influence, but like he had no weapons on him or whatever. And the cops, like it got caught on their body cams that they actually pursued the man and shot him. Like they shot him to death. Or you know, that's like it seems like obviously for every mainstream situation that comes out, there's like a dozen other, you know what I'm saying, not so mainstream situations that come out or whatever. But I just want to ask, like, do y'all have any current events or any specific things that popped up in the news about police or the system in general that you want to kind of like just put out there? You want to talk about real quick?
Oh shit. I have one. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Go ahead, Shay.
I saw the video with the guy, and my thing is like police are supposed to protect and serve. That's what I've been learning in school. And there were plenty of things they could have done to prevent him for him to get to prevent him from getting shot. Shot. So they could have took him home, called Uber for him, and got his car towed, right? There's
Right.
plenty of other things they could have done, but they just went ahead with that route. And I just don't understand like why police officers can't just do community policing. That's what we've been learning in school. So I don't understand like why can't they do that?
Right. Did anybody else see that video?
Yes, like what the hell? Like people can't run away. Like you can't run away from the cops no more. Like that's so confusing to me. Like what happened to like police chasing or just people getting away? Like it's all right. We're gonna catch him another time. He'll probably, like what is this shit about?
Yeah.
It's very upsetting. Like, cause you run now, that's automatic. Like that's your death sentence.
Right. Yes, it's like they feel automatically they have a license to take your life. You know what I'm saying? Because basically that's what that badge is. It is a license that if I needed to use what's it called, fatal force, then you know what I'm saying, nobody's really gonna bat an eye or saying even question my actions because that's just how the system is. I was reading a situation, like there's so many different memes out here or whatever, but you know they all be spitting little truth and little chunks and facts of truth. Like for example, I seen a meme where a black man was saying, if I had gotten accused of just one act of sexual abuse, you know, my reputation and my whole livelihood would be affected by it. But you know, the president has several, like he has dozens of accusations against him, and you know he still continues on in America to, you know, live his life however he wants to. At the end of the day, going back to what Shay said, we have to acknowledge that this is two different Americas. When the Constitution, when you know what I'm saying, all these beautiful bylaws and amendments were created, they weren't done in the favor of people of color. You know what I'm saying? They weren't done in favor of black folk, because you have to go back to the origins of this country. Like, it was Europeans that came to this country. They almost completely wiped out a whole civilization of Native Americans. And then on top of that, brought Africans over here as slaves. You know what I'm saying? So like when they wrote these amendments and when they wrote the Constitution, you know, the right for liberty and pursuit of happiness, they weren't talking about the Africans. They weren't talking about the Indians. Okay, they were talking about themselves. They were talking about the white America that they were establishing and that they believed was going to be the ultimate power and hierarchy. So at the end of the day, everything goes back to origin. If you want to understand why something is the way it is, you have to go back and trace its origins, and you have to trace history, and you're going to uncover a lot of things. And a lot of the things is ugly, is messed up, is grimy, like, and there's just honestly no way around it. To compromise it or to like rationalize it is to basically to lie to oneself, you know what I'm saying? But ultimately, America, I should say predominantly white America, is trying to cleanse itself of its past sins, you know what I'm saying, of its past history, which is why anytime conversations on like slavery or reparations come up, or kneeling for the flag, kneeling during the national anthem, anytime those types of conversations come up, it's always an issue, you know what I'm saying? Because the reality is, now that we're an integrated society, meaning like everybody, you know what I'm saying, like different races go to the same school, work in the same places, stuff like that. Like, this is a reality that is no longer convenient for white America to acknowledge that slavery existed, that, you know, deportations exist the way that it does, you know, telling people, look, you're illegal over here, you go back to your country, but then America, like Europeans are not even from North America, they're from Europe, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, at the end of the day, you have to, like I said, go back to the origins of things and trace the hypocrisy. And, you know, I agree with what Precious just said about, like, if somebody's going to run away, like, yo, let them run, like, live to catch him another day. And especially if he was intoxicated, like, how far is he going to get, really? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just one of those things where, unfortunately, the system is clearly built to keep people of color down, you know what I'm saying? And anything that one person from white America does to get to the top, somebody of color has to work 3-4 times just as hard to get to that point. I remember when I worked in the mayor's office like 2 years ago, I was there as an intern. I was just trying to get more experience, see how it is inside of City Hall, this and that. Let me tell you, inside of City Hall, you know what I'm saying? And this is like the heart of government in New York City. New York is a pretty diverse city. Like, it's segregated. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you go to this place, you know, this is where Hispanics is at. Over here, this is where the black community is at, the white community. It's segregated, but it's a lot of different backgrounds and nationalities or ethnicities in New York. But the heart of New York City government doesn't represent that, because when I was in City Hall, over 80% of the people working there were white. You know what I'm saying? And about 50% of the people working in City Hall weren't even from New York. So it's like, you know, they're coming from like Boston or, you know, some other places or whatever. So it's like, at the end, like the most obvious thing that somebody could think of, like, okay, you know, the people that work for our city government, stuff like that, they should probably be from our city, you know what I'm saying? That way taxes stay in the city, you're giving back to the city, all of that stuff. But that's not the way that a lot of these folk think. And obviously that ends up affecting even how policy goes about. Like the chief of staff to the mayor, to Mayor De Blasio. When I was looking into her background, because if you're trying to get up into different positions or whatever, you should always study people and the positions they're in and see how they got to those positions, so that you can see how can you apply certain things to yourself. So I was looking into the chief of staff, who's basically like, that's like basically the manager of whatever elected official, right? And when I was looking into her information, like, she didn't even have a master's degree. You know what I'm saying? Meanwhile, she's the chief of staff to the mayor, which is a pretty big position. It's a pretty big deal. And I'm over here interning, you know what I'm saying? And at that time, it was a voluntary internship position, so I wasn't getting paid for it. And then going for my master's degree, and we're like in two different spaces, you know what I'm saying? Obviously, she might have had other experience, like maybe local leadership, grassroots, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you know for a fact that a lot of that had to be from connects, and there's just kind of no way around it. So at the end of the day, we're living in two different Americas. You know what I'm saying? Like, whatever you hear white America say, oh, this is what America's built on and this is what it's founded on, this and that, that's only true for them. You know what I'm saying? Whether they acknowledge it or not, or whether they fully recognize it or not, that's basically the reality that, you know what I'm saying, specifically people of color have to, be confronted with and deal with.
Professor.
Yeah.
I was watching this video for constitutional law, and basically the founders didn't want to include slavery in there. And they were trying to blame slavery on King George. So yeah, you are right. They are trying to rid their past of, slavery, but it shows up in mass incarceration. And it's crazy to me, Germany has this crazy past of Holocaust, but their system is way different than America's. You know what I'm trying to say? But
Yeah.
slavery does shows up in mass incarceration in America.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to give credit where credit is due. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not moral, it's not quote unquote right, but it's very intelligent the way that they choose to move about operating this machine. You know what I'm saying? This machine they call government or mass incarceration or whatever, because at the end of the day, the warfare that they use is not even physical. You know what I'm saying? They're using policy, they're using mental strategy to kind of turn things around and turn it on his back. I'm trying to. It's like I don't know if anybody watches baseball here, but the Houston Astros got caught up in one of the biggest scandals in the history of baseball. Like, they were cheating, and through that cheating, basically they won the World Series back in 2017. So long story short, there's a camera in center field that allows you to look directly behind the pitcher and into the catcher, and you can see the catcher moving his fingers. Like when he throws down one, that means fastball. Two, that's maybe a curveball, a changeup, something like that. Every team has cameras in their dugout now so that they can use it for replay, like if they want to challenge a call. But it was only supposed to be used only for that purpose. The Astros, they were using it to steal signs. Like they weren't stealing it the old-fashioned way, like somebody standing on base and looking at the catcher's fingers and stuff like that. Like, they actually used technology to basically steal these signs. When the president of the Houston Astros or the owner of the Houston Astros was being questioned on, on whether or not the cheating helped for them to win the World Series, he basically said that it didn't. And and then somebody came through, literally right after that question, and asked him a question. What do you mean that it didn't help you win the World Series? And then he literally denies it. He just finished saying that it didn't help him. And then literally one question later, he just says, I never said that. You know what I'm saying? Like using kind of this reverse psychology, mental warfare kind of thing. So this is a thing that America does. Especially the top 1%, the wealthiest individuals in the country, because You know what I'm saying? Like if we look at, for example, the war on drugs, you know, just think of how clever that is. Like if you're going to use racism, you know what I'm saying, to oppress people and things of that nature, how much more oppressive can racism be than if you make those people be racist against themselves or be discriminatory against themselves by telling them, look, drugs is an epidemic here in this country. It's, you know, it's killing people. It's the worst thing that could happen to us. Blah, blah. We got to go into these communities and we got to take the drugs out. Everybody only has whatever news media outlets are available at the time, and they're like, yeah, you got to take them off the streets. And if those people if the people that the media happens to be showing happen to be black or happen to be Hispanic, and the image you have of people selling drugs is black or Hispanic, you're not thinking you're sending your own people to jail. You're thinking you're sending bad people to jail, and unfortunately, they just happen to be your own people. You know what I'm saying? So, like, just the system of psychology mixed with policy, mixed with strategy, all of that, it's just a crazy combination of things. So definitely agree with the point you said, Shay, you know, and unfortunately it's going to continue like this. And when we see like the defunding of the police, for example, like LA came out and said they're going to defund the police by 100 million or 150 million. New York just came out and said the same thing, that they're going to defund the police. When they defund the police, we have to keep an eye on, you know, okay, you're taking the money and you're saying you're going to put it back into communities of color, but what specifically is that money going to be allocated towards? You know what I'm saying? Because there's always a way to loophole it so that money comes back to, you know what I'm saying, to the people that are supposedly giving that money for a certain cause or a certain purpose or whatever. I bet. So today we are getting into health in the criminal justice system. One thing that doesn't get mentioned too often or brought up too often is health, and not just, you know what I'm saying, not just physical health, but mental health, emotional health, just the overall well-being of individuals, because as we just learned with solitary confinement not too recently, not too long ago, I should say, we see that solitary confinement at over a week automatically creates PTSD, it creates trauma, right? It makes people go through depression, suicidal ideations. Like, there's a lot of different up and down emotions people go through, because at the end of the day, people are social beings. You know what I'm saying? Like, as mentioned before, with this whole quarantine situation, a lot of people are losing their minds. A lot of people are like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this, especially in the beginning, you know what I'm saying? When people didn't get used to it yet, like in the beginning, people were just like super stressed out about the idea, yo, I can't go clubbing, I can't hang out with my friends, I can't, you know what I'm saying, whatever the case is. But the reality is, even in that situation, you still have more freedom than somebody who's in solitary confinement. You know what I'm saying? But we can see in real life how that affected people's, you know, emotions and psychology and stuff like that. Now, the other elements of criminal justice we don't think about health-wise is the people who have disabilities. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's definitely people locked up that have some kind of, you know, maybe walking disability or speaking disability, or what, you know, something that's keeping them from, quote unquote, fully functioning, right? Or moving or functioning in the way that everybody else is around them. You have that, you have diseases, you have, for example, pulmonary diseases, you have cardiovascular diseases. We already know that in the Black and Hispanic community, people oftentimes have diabetes and high cholesterol. You know what I'm saying? Like, we be eating too much fried food. We be throwing too much adobo on our rice. Whatever the case is, the fact is that there's a lot of health-related issues going on in there because it was already happening out here. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. Then on top of that, you know what I'm saying, like, yeah, like some of the dudes that get locked up, there's some of the hardest, baddest dudes or this and that, whatever, but everybody has a breaking point. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's dudes that commit murder that end up taking their own life. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like you're doing 25 to life. It's like, what's the point of even living? You know what I'm saying? Like that's the way that a lot of people think. Like if I'm in there and I'm doing 25 to life, and especially let's say if you were somebody that was wrongfully convicted or something like that, you might not want to live no more. You might not want to find incentive to live anymore. You know, and in the process, you might end up taking your own life or whatnot. So all of these things are things to be considered when it comes to health and the criminal justice system. It's not only specific to like getting into fights and getting slashed and, you know what I'm saying, solitary confinement. All of that does obviously add on to everything else. But the reality is there's still other things going on, even outside of these things. So for today's topic, I'm not sure if the discussion leader is here forward. Could you just let me know? If you're here, let me know who the discussion leader is. I feel like our discussion leaders be going MIA on us on those specific days.
I hope it's not me. Is it me? Is it Shaughnessy?
I'm about to check right now.
Please, because I was having the time of my life this weekend. I don't even know if it's me.
Oh man. All right, let's see. Yeah, y'all know how to access the discussion leader document, right?
No.
Yeah.
Blackboard?
Yeah, you go to Blackboard and then under, what's it at? On the course materials. As soon as you click course materials, it's the first thing that you see at the very top, which says discussion leaders. So give me a second. I'm pulling up the document right now. Nah, it's not you, Shaughnessy. You were Ferguson. So that was the last class.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's on the spreadsheet. Just make sure if you didn't post up your questions already, just post them up, and then obviously everybody will just follow up. You know what I'm saying, with whatever responses they have and stuff like that.
Okay.
So we had Yancy for today, but it seems Yancy is not on the call right now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share the screen, and I know that last time I shared the screen, it seemed like there was like hieroglyphics and stuff like that. Like you couldn't really see the words that clear. I'm getting on a call today with IT to see if maybe they can assist me with that. Hopefully that clears everything up, and then from there, you know, once I share the screen, it's not going to be that difficult for y'all to what's it called? For y'all to see the material or whatever. Give me 1 second. Share screen. All right. All right, so we're gonna start off with like physical disabilities and the different illnesses because I do have videos that I posted for y'all. They're on the syllabus. The first one is a video on like mental illness or whatnot, but I gotta see if it's gonna run or if it's gonna play smoothly on my side. If not, obviously I'm gonna just have to end the class maybe like 20-30 minutes earlier so you could watch the video by yourself. But basically that video is a sneak peek inside of the what's it called, inside of a correctional facility, and it's kind of breaking down how people get diagnosed, how people get treated for mental illness inside of certain facilities. And basically it just gives you an upfront and personal look. And there's actually a moment in that video where, you know what I'm saying, like you see some realness, you know what I'm saying? You see some stuff that really hits you hard, like, wow, like people are really, really going through it. Like it's not mental illness just for the sake of mental illness. It's like it makes sense why it's happening. It makes sense why people experience, you know, certain emotions or certain kinds of, how do I say, chemical imbalances in the mind, stuff like that. So, but before we get into that, I'm gonna go over some of these other stats in regards to disabilities. So the ACLU in 2017 said prisoners with physical disabilities are forgotten and neglected in America. All right. So basically, just to run through some of the information here, these prisoners rely on corrections staff for support and services every day, be it assistance in taking showers, getting dressed, receiving medication, utilizing law libraries, or visiting prison commissaries. Although comprehensive data on the number of prisoners with physical disabilities in jails, prisons, and detention centers across the nation are currently unavailable, as many as 26% of state prisoners report possessing a mobility, hearing, or visual disability, according to one 2003 estimate. All right, so you have basically almost 30% of state prisoners talking about experiencing some kind of mobility, like moving, walking, whatever physical movements, hearing and visual disabilities, according to like a 2003 estimate. Obviously, you know, that's a pretty far back year. Things could have changed to whatever degree from then till now, but at the end of the day, the government doesn't really collect this information as often as they should. Obviously, that's to the benefit of them, that's to the convenience of them, because it's less auditing, it's less explanation that they have to do in regards to why certain practices are happening or not happening. But at the end of the day, even if you're talking about 2003, almost 30% of state prisoners, and you're talking about state prisoners alone, you're not even talking about people held in county jails and federal facilities and stuff like that. That's a pretty high number of people that are not able to move around or hear or see things. And obviously, you know, correctional officers, they're not trained social workers, especially during that time, like in the early 2000s. So something that might be a hearing disability or a hearing impairment, you know what I'm saying, the officer might think the dude just trying to be a smart ass, and like the dude is like, what, I can't hear you, I can't, like, you know what I'm saying, and you know how it be sometimes, like dudes just be saying what, and it could sound like obnoxious or whatever, but like the dude probably really can't hear that good. That, you know, that what that the dude is saying, that could have potentially earned them, you know, being put in solitary, being, you know, having physical force used against them, like whatever the case is. Same thing with visual impairment, because a lot of people, you know, especially if you're locked up for 10 years, 5 years, whatever the case is, like anybody that has glasses, like I don't have glasses, so I can't really speak on it too much, but like anybody that has glasses or, you know, contacts or whatever, they'll tell you that in a lot of cases, it's not something that happens overnight. It happens throughout the process of a couple of years where maybe your vision starts getting blurred, you don't start seeing as good. So imagine you going through that while you're incarcerated for however many years, you know what I'm saying? Like you're supposed to make the adjustment to not being able to see without glasses. That in itself is a difficult task all on its own, because if you're using glasses, technically you're considered to be legally blind, a lot of people would say, but that's obviously a a disability in itself if your vision got incredibly bad from one moment to the next, or if you had glasses and they got stolen or they got broken or something like that, that makes things a lot more difficult as well. When cognitive disabilities and disabilities that limit a prisoner's ability for self-care are included, the proportion of prisoners with physical disabilities in prison and jails increased to 32% and 40%, respectively. So when we're talking about cognition, what specifically are we talking about? What is a cognitive disability?
Something to do with your brain.
Not being able to read.
Yeah, for sure.
Just not socially,
Right.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, not being able to be sociable. Your mental reward system, like how you interpret rewards versus risks and things of that nature. Not being able to read, not being able to write, all those things are attributed to cognition, which of course has to do with your brain. At the end of the day, the majority of people incarcerated have some form of learning disability, or reading or literacy impairment. You know what I'm saying? Where basically they're not able to read or not able to write at a depth level. You know what I'm saying? Like at a feasible or at least at an average level. A lot of people who are behind can't read, period. You know what I'm saying? Like if you took my corrections course, or even when we talked about Dope Game, like if you clicked on the link and you looked at the story of Freeway Ricky Ross, he actually tells you like he was illiterate. Like by the time that he got locked up, you know what I'm saying, he did his time. I think it was about 20 years that he did. He was illiterate before going in prison, and he was like one of the biggest drug dealers the country has ever seen. But he came out and he admitted he was illiterate up to like his late teens. That's the only reason that he didn't go to college, because he actually wanted to go to college so that he could continue playing tennis, but he couldn't even pass his entry test or his entry exam, or even fill out an application. So at the end of the day, how can you go to college if you can't even read or you can't even write? And so a lot of people, they end up being illiterate, or they're unable to read or unable to write, and they stay like that well into adulthood. But in the case of Freeway Ricky Ross, he actually was able to teach himself how to read and write, starting off with like little things, learning the alphabet and then pronouncing little words, and from there going to law library on a daily and kind of just learning this the legal vocabulary. And in him doing that, he was actually able to reverse his sentence, which originally it was a life sentence. He had a life sentence for drugs, for selling cocaine and stuff like that. He was able to turn his life sentence into, I think it was about 20 years. So with that being said, a lot of people are unfortunately illiterate. Then you have also other conditions like dyslexia, where somebody, it's not necessarily that you can't read as much as it's a chemical imbalance in your mind that basically makes you see words or see things differently, and so it makes it a lot more difficult for you to try to read, because letters and numbers and things of that nature, like, they become way more confusing than it would for the average person. So, you have all these different factors, and then at the same time, you're being expected and told to get ready to come out from prison and to get a job or to go to school or this and that. When at the end of the day, a lot of people behind the wall, they only got maybe a 5th grade reading level education, You know what I'm saying? And in a lot of cases, you got less. You got people who they're still at a second grade education level. You know what I'm saying? And so the system has failed them in all these different ways, and then tells them, yo, you got to pick yourself up and you gotta figure it out. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, we just you being college students and all of us having experienced school at some point in our lives, like we know how important reading and writing is. Like we see it all the time on social media. Like if people didn't know how to read and write, you know what I'm saying, they wouldn't even be able to post a caption. You know what I'm saying? Like they have to be like, you know, like the joke on Floyd and Mayweather is that since 50 Cent exposed him for not knowing how to read or write, like anytime he posts a picture and they got a long caption, like that's probably one of his shorties on the side, like posting the joint for him or whatever. So, you know, that's like a funny thing that social media has made, because obviously it don't matter for Floyd Mayweather. He's basically almost a billionaire. You know what I'm saying? But that's like, he's obviously a rare case of somebody that can get away with, you know, not being able to have strong reading and writing skills, but he's a professional boxer.
Like, just like how people, like, I don't mean to cut you off, Professor, but like they were saying like, oh, like he did coke or he did whatever, he was the type of drug he was on. That don't mean nothing. He told y'all he cannot breathe. You know what I'm saying? And the fact, did y'all see his like sex tape video that went around and stuff like that? Like y'all found all the stuff about this guy. That still don't change the fact of how we felt. You know, justice still needs to be served.
Whose video?
Did anybody see that video of him picking up the girl in the video and he was recording? Nobody seen that?
No.
Which one?
George Floyd.
Oh yeah, I mean we've talked about that like the last week, 2 weeks or whatnot. Like in that case, obviously justice does need to be served. Like that's a different scenario than, like, for example, like now we're focusing the conversation around like learning disabilities or physical or mental or, you know, educational kind of disabilities. But obviously in the George Floyd case, you know, things are still unraveling and unfolding regarding that situation. But, you know, we have to see what happens to the officers, because yeah, they got arrested and got put into custody, but ultimately anything can still happen with the system. You know, we've seen crazier things. But in regards to like just literacy and not being able to read and write, like even when I was in Rikers Island and even when I was a case manager working at a halfway house with people on parole and probation, I had to do this exam or this, it was kind of like an interview mechanism called the LSIR, Level of Service Inventory Revised. I don't know why they called it that, but whatever. And basically it was like a list of questions. It was like 20 plus questions that me as the interviewer, I have to ask the other person. And basically, you know, some of the questions there were, you have less than the 5th grade education level, you have less than the 9th grade, less than the 12th grade reading educational level or whatever. And way too many times you see people who got less than 9th grade education levels, and you know what I'm saying, they're older than me. You know what I'm saying? And so at the end of the day, it's not uncommon to come across people that they're not able to read, they're not able to write, and that affects crime too. You know what I'm saying? Just think of a baby, right? Think of a baby, and this is like an easy example to kind of break down. When a baby's crying, a lot of times, I mean, let's take out the possibility of them using their diaper, you know what I'm saying, going in their diaper, whatever. A lot of times if a baby's crying, or if a kid's crying, like, it's because they're struggling to communicate something. You know what I'm saying? They're struggling to like get something out, and you know what I'm saying, to make it known, like, this is what I need you to provide me with this and that, blah, blah. I mean, it's not cool that I'm saying it like this, but it's the reality. There's a lot of grown men that are not able to communicate like grown men. And so when they put out their words, it's almost like a child trying to convey themselves. And if you don't have the words, because you don't have the vocabulary and the understand, like the educational capacity to like convey what you're trying to convey, a lot of it comes out in the form of aggression, or it comes out in the form of anger, or you know what I'm saying, like that same anger that you would have as a baby, you know, when you put out your temper tantrums or whatever. It's the same thing for a grown man. Nothing really changed. And we talk a lot. One of my first boss, when I worked in the halfway house, he told me something. He said something that always stuck with me. In criminal justice, we talk a lot about rehabilitation, right? Like putting somebody from here back into society and making them relearn something so that they can go back into society or whatever. But my boss used to tell me, we talk about rehabilitation, but some of these people have never been habilitated in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're basically telling me I gotta give back something to somebody when they never had it in the first place, because that's what re is. Re is to do again or to give back. I can't give you back something you never had. You know what I'm saying? And that always stuck with me. And of course, at the end of the day, you have a lot of grown men that, you know what I'm saying, oftentimes by no fault of their own, because it's the system that failed them. Even like we also do have choices, have the ability to make choices, to learn, to read on our own time, to get educated or whatever. But imagine like if internally you still never got out of childhood or whatever, you know, as kids, what really mattered to us was like being accepted, was peer pressure, things of that nature. Oh no, they're not gonna think I'm cool, this and that. If you late in your life are not able to read or write, and other people aren't able to read or write, and then I don't know where you come up with this idea, hey, I think I want to read and write. You think everybody else, like a lot of times other people are not gonna look at you like down anymore, because it's like, oh, he trying to be different, he think he better than us, this and that. So in trying to fit in, because maybe other parts of society won't accept you, you know what I'm saying, you compromise your ability to learn and to become a better version of yourself, you know what I'm saying, because now you want to fit in with this other group of people and stuff like that. Some people obviously are just born leaders and can think for themselves, and it don't matter what nobody says, or at some point they were followers and then they become leaders because they got tired of following. But a lot of people, they never get out of what they know, and you know what I'm saying, it's just a big reality in the system. Let me share this. So yeah, so those are some of the numbers in regards to disability and things of that nature. Here they just give you different examples and all of that. Disabled people, and this is from prison policy. These are numbers from 2017, from a 2017 report. Disabled people represent a disproportionate number of those stopped, arrested, and murdered by police. This is partially because, as the ACLU of Southern California and Bazelon Center for Mental Health Law reported, the war on drugs and other mass incarceration policies criminalize behaviors related to disability. So things such as substance use, which is often a method of self-medication for pain and other symptoms, homelessness. As of 2015, the Department of Housing and Urban Development estimated 78% of people in shelters had a disability, and atypical reactions to social cues, which may be interpreted as disorderly conduct. So basically, the justice system targets behaviors that are often associated with disabilities. So substance use, whenever you see, like, obviously it's not every single time, but in a lot of cases where you find somebody that maybe they can't read, or they can't, you know, or they have some form of disability, whether physical, mental, emotional, because now, you know, emotional trauma and stress, like depression, that's in a lot of cases considered disability by people or by professionals. All of that stuff can lead to substance use, whether it's using marijuana, whether it's using coke, whether it's using painkillers, especially like if you have a physical disability, like maybe you developed arthritis, or, you know, in the hood, obviously a lot of times, unfortunately, people get shot. So, you know what I'm saying, like you're probably gonna take something to try and get off that. Like if you get shot and you survive it, you're probably gonna be disabled for a certain amount of time. You know what I'm saying? Because you gotta recover and stuff like that. So easily you could get hooked on drugs, and that might not even be the original intent of why you use them. Homelessness, obviously, if you have a disability, physical, mental, emotional, that's going to affect your ability to find work, period. It don't even matter if you've been to jail before or if you've been locked up before. The reality is that there's a large number of people who are disabled, that they're not able to work. You know what I'm saying? And so you have to get the paperwork and all that to get diagnosed as disabled in order for you to qualify for Social Security or something of that nature. But if you don't even have insurance, or, you know, if the health experts discriminate against you because of color and they're not going to assess you correctly, they're probably going to say, nah, you're all right, this and that, but you're actually going through it. That's obviously going to affect your ability to get Social Security. And then, of course, there's other things like just attitudes and little mannerisms and stuff like that all come usually from individuals who have a form of disability or whatever. Societal attitudes toward disabled people and the intersection of disability, race, and class contribute to their criminalization. The Ruderman Foundation reports that in police use of force incidents, media and police often blame disabled people for their own victimization, especially by characterizing disabled people of color as threatening and refusing to comply with instructions. I don't know if anyone ever saw this video, but this happened with a black mother and her son, where basically her son had schizophrenia. All right, y'all know what schizophrenia is, right?
For the most part.
What are some symptoms of schizophrenia?
Maybe hallucination.
Right, hallucinating, hearing voices in your head, seeing things of that nature. And usually that's created by a chemical imbalance that people have in their head. So basically, in this case of the mother, she had an emergency call towards 911 that she made. She basically had a knife pointed at her or something, you know. Basically, she felt physically threatened at that moment by her son. But she did tell police, basically before arriving, that her son had a mental disability, right? And so when the police came, when the police came, that's when her son came out and he had a knife in his hand. But she had already given the police the heads up that he had a mental disability, right? And when they arrived at the scene, basically they saw him, he had the knife in his hand or whatever, and within seconds they proceeded to shoot at him, basically putting bullets in him, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? A situation like that obviously created a lot of uproar. It created a lot of frustration because obviously the mother, she's doing the best that she can, right? Like if you ever dealt with a family member, or you ever, you know, been around a family member who had some kind of form of mental illness, just working with them on just one day, for example, can already be a lot. Having to do it every single day is another story. So the mother tried her best to obviously provide as much information as she could so that way the police can handle things appropriately. And they did the complete opposite, basically, and just shot him. Was it the guy's fault that he had a mental health disorder? No. But at the end of the day, the actions that police took didn't say otherwise. You know what I'm saying? And so that created a situation that could have probably been de-escalated way easier. There probably could have been a way where, you know, they could have handled the situation differently because the son, he wasn't even near them. Like, he just came out the door and basically they just shot at him while the police were actually several feet away. And so all of that created more trauma in the community or in the in that family, in that household, and, you know, unfortunately it ended the way that it did. The police are often the first responders to a person in crisis. In 2015, the Washington Post reported that 124 cases of officer shootings, 27% of all officer shootings that year involved a mental health crisis. In 6% of those cases, the officers were explicitly called to help the person get medical treatment and shot them instead. So this is from a report from the Washington Post. So they're saying almost 30% of all shootings that year involved a mental health crisis. And in 36% of those cases, the officers were explicitly called to help the person get medical treatment and then shot them instead. So
I have a question.
Go ahead.
You know, like how doctors and they have to take an oath to treat everybody no matter what. Do police have a similar oath that they have to take?
To treat everybody.
Yeah, like protect everybody the same way.
Oh yeah, of course. When you become a police officer, you take a sworn oath to be a protector and to uphold justice, right? But obviously, as we've been seeing for the last couple of weeks, it seems to be the complete opposite, and not even seems, because me saying the word seems is implying that it may or may not be. We see clearly, you know what I'm saying, that police are not really upholding justice the way that they're supposed to. You got police officers not only being aggressive towards protesters and letting, you know, in a lot of cases we see they let rioters, specifically white rioters, go into stores, break in, and then come out, and then they just leave them. You know, they don't run after them or anything like that. They also attack reporters and stuff like that. Like, I've seen videos recently where they're shooting reporters with tear gas and rubber bullets and stuff like that. And literally they're just reporting, and it's pretty obvious they're reporting because they got their cameras, they got their mics, all that stuff, and they're still doing this. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if anybody saw the CNN reporter that got arrested, but
Yeah.
he was literally live on the camera when that situation happened. And looking back at it, it's very difficult for you to make yourself look any worse if your job as a police officer is to like diffuse the situation, to de-escalate what's happening, and to make police look better than what the media is portraying them, or whatever they want to call it. The reality is, me arresting a news reporter on live television, that probably is not going to help my case or my cause to look like a good cop, or to make it look like cops are good. You know what I'm saying? Especially when just down the block there was another CNN reporter, and this reporter was white. And he didn't get arrested. With the reporter that got arrested, he was black and Hispanic, and he was dark skinned. And you know, his crew got arrested with him as well, of course. But it kind of just shows that the only people that police maybe are trying to protect in a lot of cases are themselves, because ultimately the average civilian is not going to be a threat to police. You know what I'm saying? Especially if police already have guns, they already have a bulletproof vest underneath in a lot of cases, and they already roll up on somebody like 12 deep sometimes. You know what I'm saying? So the odds of somebody being a threat specifically to police is very difficult in a lot of cases. When disabled people are detained in jails or waiting for trial or transferred to a medical facility, they are denied access to medical care, which can worsen existing health problems. this can be life-threatening or even fatal. The top cause of death in local jails is suicide, which occurs in jail at much higher rates than in the general U.S. population. So by percentage-wise, you have more people committing suicide in jail than in the actual U.S. population as a whole. Now, obviously, you have to look at the differentials as well in regards to the general U.S. population. You're going to find a lot more suicides in the white community than you will in the Black and Hispanic community. That could be for different reasons, right? A lot of kids in the white community have a different upbringing and a different way of just going about their business. And at the same time, there's a lot of kids in suburban America that, because you lived in the suburbs for so long, you never really had to deal with hardship like that. So once hardship comes at your door, you know what I'm saying, whether it's a divorce or whether it's somebody picking on you, or, you know what I'm saying, maybe getting a bad grade in school, things of that nature. Like, a lot of times these kids or these individuals, they're not able to deal with this hardship as well as somebody, you know, from the Black and brown community, that it ends up leading to them taking their own life more times than in the Black and brown community. Now, throughout the years, like, we have seen that there is a upward trend in people of color taking their lives more. But at the same time, like, obviously in comparison, it's still not the same thing, because in a lot of cases, because you grow up in poverty or you grow up low middle class or lower class or whatever, your access to resources is very scarce. And so survival, like, it wasn't even an option for you. Like, you just had to do it. It's either you survive or you die in a lot of cases. And so a lot of skills were learned throughout the process in order to learn how to survive, and in order to, you know, just be able to make it through the day, or in order to just see the age of 18 or 21 or whatever the case is. So by the time that a lot of students get to college, or, you know what I'm saying, get to a certain work field or whatever, they already learned certain life skills that it's transferable, you know what I'm saying, to their careers, or transferable to their education and stuff like that. For example, 50 Cent, he got shot at 9 times, for example. There's a book written about 50 Cent called The 50th Law of Power, which basically is talking about how since 50's been through, like, real life traumatic situations, whether it's, you know, his mother getting killed when he was a kid, or getting shot at, or selling drugs or whatever. The fact of the matter is, now that he's a millionaire and he has all this money and he's starting up these different businesses and stuff like that, he doesn't go into a boardroom meeting with the same level of anxiety that the average executive or manager would go through. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's, like, to him, you know, losing out money on a deal really isn't, it's not going to affect him during, you know what I'm saying, it's not going to overwhelm him during his sleep, because he's already been through situations that are 50 times worse than losing some money that he's always able to make back. You get what I'm saying? And so at the end of the day, when we consider these things, and we consider the difference between the white community and communities of color, and even though communities of color are, you know, they do better percentage-wise in regards to not committing suicide on the outside, it just, that in itself, the fact that the numbers behind jails and behind prisons and stuff like that, the fact that the suicides in there actually are higher than on the outside, it should tell you something about what jail and what prison does to a person's mind. You know what I'm saying? Because, again, you have some of the hardest dudes going in there, and they still feel the need to take their lives. It kind of tells you the environment is overwhelming. In 2016, Public Citizen and the Treatment Advocacy Center reported 91% of surveyed jail personnel said that they had seriously mentally ill prisoners who required a suicide watch. All right. So the fact is that even staff and employees that work in the jail, over 90% of them said that basically they had somebody in jail at some point that required a level of suicide watch or whatever. So that they had, yeah, that they had seriously mentally ill prisoners who had required suicide watch and things like that. And I'm gonna go over these last stats right here. Although jails are being used as substitutes for mental health facilities, they do not have the resources or training to handle medical and mental health emergencies. Less than half of the surveyed personnel in the Public Citizen and Treatment Advocacy Center reported that their jail was equipped to offer mental health treatment. So basically only about 50%, a little under 50% of facilities said that they had been equipped to handle some kind of mental health treatment and things of that nature. Despite 95% of respondents reporting that their jails frequently housed mentally ill people, only 21% reported their jail having any kind of program to support mentally ill people upon their release. So that right there tells you everything, right? We have people trying to get rehabilitated while they're behind the wall, but it's like, how can they get rehabilitated when these facilities don't even have the things to rehabilitate them with? You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, programs for like education or learning a trade or things of that nature, they are provided, but even that's not even provided in bulk. So imagine, okay, that's not being provided. All right, what's the next thing? I need some mental health treatment. Say I need a therapist. I need to talk to somebody. I'm going through a lot of things, and I never got these things out of, off my chest, since the beginning of my life. Like, how do I go about this? A lot of these facilities, as you saw, like over 90% to a 20% ratio. That's terrible. And you just got people behind the wall suffering, trying to figure out, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? When at the end of the day, sometimes it's not even them. You know what I'm saying? It's the circumstances that they were put in, or that they were born in, and the circumstances that they're continually still being kept in, because as you can see, there's a lot of money being put into police departments, you know what I'm saying, just so that it could end up in lawsuits and settlements and things of that nature, when a lot of that money can actually be put into prisons and into jails in order to provide mental health treatment and rehabilitation and things of that nature. But it's not being looked at that way because, again, it doesn't benefit their bottom line. And the bottom line is, to continue to keep minority groups at the bottom, keep themselves elevated, and that's it, So it kind of makes it difficult for anyone who touches the system to actually come out and be efficient once they return. Something else that needs to be taken into consideration is, obviously everybody has some PTSD or some trauma, things of that nature, even before they get locked up. But now that gets amplified once you step into jail for the first time period. And you could be in jail for 1 hour. A lot can go down in an hour. That's already a long time for a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know dudes is out here doing 10, 20 years, and they're like, yeah, yo, I had a long bid, this and that, but it was light. Ain't nothing light about being in jail. Ain't nothing light, even if it's for 1 minute, ain't nothing light about that. Because at the end of the day, anything can happen at any moment. You could be an innocent bystander. You could have no affiliation with no one and nothing, and somebody could find a reason to pick a fight with you, or to slash you, or to jump you, or to rob you, or to rape you, or whatever the case is. So just the fact that you step foot in the jail in itself, even if it's for an hour, a day, a week, a month, however long, that in itself, and obviously the longer you go, the more trauma you develop, that in itself is going to create mental illness. Even if, let's say hypothetically, if you didn't have any, just being in the facility automatically created it for you. You know what I'm saying? Let alone if you get thrown in solitary confinement. Because as we saw, the average person, they're in solitary confinement for at least a month. You know what I'm saying? So considering all of this, people have a lot of hurdles and obstacles that they have to go over and that they have to jump over in order to be good, quote unquote, good by the time that they come back to the community. And it's a lot of expectation that's being put on people that are ill prepared, and they're not even being, you know what I'm saying, like their situation is not even being assessed accurately, because it's like telling somebody to put a circle inside of a square hole. You can't do it. It's not going to happen. If you end up fitting it in there, it probably is because you broke it or something like that, and obviously you're going to fit it at some point, but it kind of tells you something. In order for you to fit something like one shape into another shape, you might have to break it. You might end up being broken because of that process and becoming a lesser version of yourself overall. Before I continue, I just want to open it up to like some comments, questions, because obviously our discussion leader isn't present for today. But what are some of your general thoughts and questions that you have about kind of what we're going over right now?
So with recent times, right, they don't train police officers to deal with physically and mentally disabled people. That's not part of the training, no?
No, it's not part of the training, unfortunately.
But why, if they have done all of these studies and research, why don't they do something with it to lower the number of people who get mistreated in prisons because they either deaf or they have a mental illness? Wouldn't that make sense to do that?
It would make sense to do that, but at the end, all that training and all of that resourcing, it costs money. And at the same time, you're talking about officers that they've already been working in there for 20, even 30 years sometimes. And now you're telling them whatever they were doing before, they have to unlearn that and learn this new way. A lot of officers ain't trying to hear that, especially, again, if they've been there for even at least 10 years, even less, 5 years, you know. By the time you're 5 years on the job, a lot of officers already have a sense of, like, I know what I'm doing. I'm a vet, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a veteran in this thing. Don't tell me how to do my job. You know what I'm saying? So, like, there's already this attitude or this mentality that comes with being an officer, especially after a certain amount of time. I'm not saying every single officer thinks like that, but just from my experience, having been around a lot of people, I would say, like, the majority definitely think like that. And so it's just the reality of the situation, where it's like, even if you try to implement certain programs or certain trainings and tactics, not every officer is going to do it. And even like if they don't do it, unless they do something where like somebody gets killed and, you know what I'm saying, like at least to death, and it's like obvious, yeah, you know, we can fire this person. Most officers, they're not going to get fired for not following certain orders or whatever. They'll just get moved to like a different post or a different position or whatever. But at the end of the day, because the unions are so strong and they protect the officers, and what the officers believe in, nothing is really going to happen to the officer for not following up with, you know what I'm saying, with these programs and stuff like that. And I say that because I've experienced it, like having worked in Rikers Island as a program coordinator and trying to help people get programs for like education and training for like OSHA and stuff like that, electrical, food handlers, things of that nature. Like there were several officers and a lot, I would have to say the majority were actually pretty open-minded to it, but there were actually way too many officers that I've came across that they found it to be an issue that we were providing these services to the detainees, because the way that the officers were looking at it was, we're basically rewarding detainees who outside of the program, they be acting up, they be wilding, this and that, which I understand, you know what I'm saying? But what the officers in a lot of cases didn't understand was that in us providing this programming, it keeps the detainees occupied. You don't even, for the hour, the 2 hours that they're taking classes with us, you don't even have to worry about them because they're in the classroom with us. That means that even if they don't get nothing out of it, at the very least they didn't get into a fight, but they didn't slash somebody. You know what I'm saying? But oftentimes, for whatever reason, you know, a lot of officers felt the way about it, and they felt the way mainly because they felt like we were rewarding bad behavior, when in reality we were just trying to approach things differently, which is treat people like humans. You know what I'm saying? Like, treat them like actual humans instead of animals. And because we know they're going to come out at some point, they need to get these training skills, they need to get this education, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, oftentimes the training, even if they did get trained, it wouldn't even matter, because when an officer decides this is how I'm gonna do it and that's it, that's probably what it's gonna be anyways, especially if they've been there for like I said, like 15 years and up and stuff like that. What
Okay,
the
but
thoughts of some other, go ahead.
in the in the medical field, right? If it's just one case of malpractice, right, they lose their license. In the legal field, I think if they do if they do something like malpractice and they get caught, then they lose their license. Why is it not the same for police? Like, is it just about protecting themselves so much rather than doing their job to serve the community, if that was the reason they got into policing in the first place?
Right. Let me tell you something. That was a powerful question, and that was a super valid question. To be honest with you, even I don't answer all the way, because ultimately, you know what I'm saying, and if you know what I'm saying, because I use IG a lot, like I'm on Instagram reading the comments, this and that about different stuff or whatever. Like, a lot of people say this and they might not be wrong. They say police are the biggest gang. You know what I'm saying? Ultimately, you know, there's an emphasis on like cracking down on gangs and, you know, adding extra charges on somebody for being in a gang or whatever. Like, that's the whole purpose of like creating RICO charges and things of that nature. But in their own right, oftentimes police have proved that they move just like a gang or like a mafia or whatever. Like back in I think it was in the 60s or 70s, there was actually a New York City police officer. His name was Frank Serpico. And Frank Serpico, like, they have a movie that they made after him. It's actually, his character is actually played by Al Pacino, aka Tony Montana, Scarface, right? But basically, Frank Serpico, he was a social worker who then became a police officer, and then he ended up becoming an undercover cop. At that time in New York City, corruption was probably at an all-time high in regards to the police department. Police used to hustle hustlers, rob robbers, like they was actually committing crime against the criminals. You know what I'm saying? The same crimes that criminals would commit, they was committing it against them. You know what I'm saying? They were blackmailing mafia members and stuff like that. So when you hear about, you know, police fearing for their lives and this and that, there was a time where the actual criminals was fearing for their own lives because of the police. You know what I'm saying? Frank Serpico, at the time, he was being offered to take a bribe from like a mafia member or whatever, and he was told by the people in his own department to take that bribe. You know what I'm saying? Because that individual that was offering the money, he was good. Like, he was Like basically, he was somebody that the police department wanted to keep ties with, so that they could continue to get money from him or from that specific group of people. And Frank said no. Well, at that moment, once you say no, and everybody's out here taking bribes and stuff like that, you automatically get labeled a snitch. You know what I'm saying? And so that ended up affecting Frank's relations with his own police department. And you can look this up. I'm gonna type it right here in the chat so that y'all can look into him. Frank Sherko. And basically that affected his relations with his own police. Long story short, throughout the years, you know, he had developed, like police developed animosity towards him, even though he's a police officer. He's an NYPD officer. You know what I'm saying? He's been on the job for several years already. And basically he was willing to testify against the NYPD to put certain people behind bars or to get certain people, you know what I'm saying, exposed or whatever. Frank, on his way to one house for a mission, he had another police officer behind him, and basically while he was about to open the door, he got shot in the back of the head. And then he was basically left for dead. And you know what I'm saying, nobody went there to rescue him or to save him or whatever. Somehow he ended up surviving that situation. And him surviving the situation, he basically ended up testifying against the police, you know what I'm saying, and got a whole bunch of people caught up and stuff like that. And Frank was a New York City police officer. You know what I'm saying? That tells you a lot of what you need to know, because like I said, if you want to learn about the current state of things, you got to go back and trace history and see what's been going on and stuff like that. If the police were willing to treat their own like that because he was trying to do the right thing and not take bribes and not, you know, get involved in criminal activity and stuff like that, if they were willing to attempt to murder their own just for the sake of keeping the little illegal stuff happening, like what do you think can potentially happen from the police to the public? You know what I'm saying? And so the police have had power for so long that it's like in a lot of cases, people actually say that the mayor is the commissioner of the NYPD or the chief of the NYPD, because in a lot of cases, the mayor actually, you know what I'm saying, like he kind of like submits to the top person in the NYPD. When the videos came out recently of the police cars crashing into people, you know, driving into protesters and stuff like that, I don't know if y'all heard him, but the mayor was basically defending the police's actions. You know what I'm saying? Like he was saying, like, you know, I didn't like what I saw. I would have preferred for it to have happened another way. You know, de-escalate it in whatever way possible. But in a situation like that, you have to look. The protesters were around the car, and the police's job at that moment is to just get out the way. So, you know, and he basically defended a cop car driving right through protesters and stuff like that. So at the end, I agree there should be a process in which quote unquote bad cops or corrupt cops get removed from the position, but oftentimes that process is overseen by the union, which is one of the most powerful unions in the world. And then on top of that, it's like, even if they do get laid off, like if they do get fired in their specific department, they could get rehired somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? So that's just the unfortunate reality, because you don't need a license to be a police officer. Like back in the day, you just needed a high school diploma. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like you had to actually put in like years of educational work and knowledge to like get that position. Like you literally just had to graduate high school, which is it's a general requirement for everybody anyways.
So basically, it's F the general welfare of the public, right?
From my point of view, that's basically what it is.
Okay.
You know,
Nothing new.
but everybody they have to make their own assessment of the situation. You know what I'm saying? But it's like they say, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, you know what I'm saying? It's not no rooster. It's probably a duck. You know, so it just takes people looking at it from an honest perspective and just acknowledging it for what it is. In regards to disabilities, there's different policies and laws, you know, that basically get put into effect. Let me see something. So basically, in regards to disability, this is what disability can be defined as: a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities of such individual, a record of such impairment, or being regarded as having such an impairment. A physical or mental impairment could include hearing and vision problems, mental illness, physical disabilities, certain diseases, or many other conditions. Major life activities may include many private or public activities, such as seeing, hearing, reproduction, working, walking, or movement. For ADA purposes, a physical impairment substantially limits major life activities only if it prevents or severely restricts the individual from performing tasks of central importance to daily life. So anything that keeps you from doing the main things you need to do in life is basically considered a disability. Now, when we talk about physical disability and stuff like that, this is directly from the Bureau of Justice Statistics website, which is from the federal government. This is the website that basically keeps track of like all their major statistics and stuff like that. Majority of prisoners in jail inmates were either overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. In 2011 to 2012, nearly 3/4 of prisoners were either overweight, 46%, obese, 26%, or morbidly obese, which is 2%, with about 1/4 of prisoners being either normal weight, 26%, or underweight, 1%. Measures of overweight, obese, and morbidly obese were calculated using the body mass index, BMI. Female prisoners, 35% were less likely than males, 47% to be overweight. However, female prisoners, 43%, were more likely than males, 27% to be either obese or morbidly obese. All right, because now basically they're just breaking it down by levels, right? There's levels to this, as they said it, right? Like you have normal weight, you have lightweight, you have obese, and then you have morbidly obese. So you have these specific health issues that can affect somebody behind the wall. And obviously that comes with a whole bunch of other stuff, because if you're obese or morbidly obese, in a lot of cases, that comes with some kind of physical mobility impairment, especially like if you're older in age. Like if you, for example, if you're like on the morbidly obese side, like if you're like 6 foot tall and you're like over 300 pounds, for example, at some point it's going to affect your knees, it's going to affect your walking, stuff like that. And obviously that can lead to you potentially getting into fights. Not you initiating the fight, but maybe somebody initiating it with you, because they might feel like you're keeping them from doing whatever, or whatever the case is. Or at the same time, like, it'll make it difficult for correctional officers to move you around from one place to the next, and that can also create more frustration, maybe leading to more opportunities to be put in solitary, or maybe getting physical use used against you, whatever the case is. In 2011, more than 6 in 10 jail inmates were either overweight, obese, or morbidly obese, while 4 in jail inmates were either normal weight or underweight. So basically repeating the same information. If we're talking about some of the other factors that affect people, give me 1 second. On a demographic level from 2011 to 2012, state and federal prisoners out of all inmates basically have over 50% have chronic conditions. So basically something that can lead to some form of, fatality or whatever. So some kind of infectious disease or, something that is basically keeping you from being all the way healthy or stable in your health. About the same number is true for jail inmates, because we already know prison and jail is 2 different things. And obviously it varies by age. If you're 50 or older, you have a much higher probability or percentage of experiencing these chronic illnesses and things of that nature, as opposed to if you're younger. But we do see that in the white community, there is a higher number. But at the same time, you have to remember that the white community makes a larger portion of the general U.S. population. So if you're talking about the white community compared to the black community, the numbers are not too far off in regards to chronic conditions and things of that nature, which obviously says, there's an overrepresentation of this in the community of color, not just in the black community, but also in the Hispanic community as well. Up here, we see like the different forms of illnesses that somebody can get or that people usually get in jail. You have 3.6% of jail inmates who have cancer. You have 26.3% of jail inmates with high blood pressure, hypertension, 2.3% who have experienced stroke-related problems, 7.2% who have experienced diabetes, high blood sugar, heart-related problems over 10%, kidney-related problems over 6%, arthritis related over basically almost 13%, asthma, you got over 20%. Now, the asthma one is interesting because, like, I think we talked about this in a previous class, but NYCHA, for example, is the worst landlord in all of New York City because their buildings are infested with mold, asbestos, things of that nature. The government, period, is the worst landlord, period, right? And it's crazy that they're the ones that basically require for people to get approved by OSHA to run their businesses and stuff like that. OSHA, OSHA, they basically are the entity that oversees that the safety and work conditions are safe, right? But the government itself oftentimes doesn't have safe working conditions, or, the buildings that it creates aren't safe for people in general. If you, you've been into housing projects or lived in them or whatever, in a lot of cases, there's paint chipping off the wall, which obviously creates exposure to lead. By the time that it gets repaired and fixed, who knows? There's mold, there's mesothelioma, all types of stuff that's just growing and coming out and stuff like that. This is no different for jails and prisons. When I was at Rikers Island, paint would literally fall off from the ceiling. And I walked into somebody's cell one time because I walked down into the housing unit. And as I walked down the housing unit, you get to look into people's cells. I had one dude show me his cell, and he was telling me how basically the paint was hanging off the ceiling because the water just kept dripping and dripping, and it kept dripping from the side of where his pillow was at. So it kept dripping on his forehead. And basically all that dripping made the paint fall off, and the paint is just like hanging over his head, basically. So you got people who have asthma, and in a lot of cases, that asthma was actually created because of the mold and because of all these health issues that already exist in these housing projects or public housing or even in the jail facilities. Because overexposure to it, it doesn't just happen in 1 day or 2 days or a month or whatever. It, you know, like obviously everybody's body reacts differently, but if you're talking about throughout the process of time, you know, years at a time or whatever, especially for little kids in like the housing projects, oftentimes you just got to give it a couple of years and you already start hearing wheezing and you start having issues breathing and things of that nature. So a lot of times that asthma is only worsened when somebody's in these facilities because, like I said, like the hygiene in these facilities, when I worked in the jails and I was in Rikers and stuff like that, like, yo, it's not somewhere you want to sleep at for a long period of time. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to even be there, period, if you don't have to, but it's just not conducive to your health in general. You know, and then you have cirrhosis of the liver, you have tuberculosis, hepatitis, you know, the different forms of hepatitis, STDs, and then you have HIV and AIDS. All right. So all of those things are things to be considered in regards to the what's it called? The health of people who are detained. And then the last thing is suicide, right? Suicide, long the leading cause of death in U.S. jails, hit a high of 50 deaths for every 100,000 inmates in 2004. The latest year for which the government has released data. That's 2.5 times the rate of suicides in state prisons and about 3.5 times that of the general population. All right. It's a problem commonly blamed on the mere fact that more mentally ill people are landing behind bars, a trend that started after state psychiatric hospitals began closing in the 1970s and promised alternatives failed to emerge. So basically, again, going back to mental illness and a lot of people not being able to have the resources to get therapy or to get some kind of assistance, they obviously would rather resort to killing themselves than continually subjecting themselves to being locked up and being treated like animals, basically. Reporters spent months examining hundreds of cases in local news reports, reviewing investigations of specific jails, and compiling a database of more than 400 lawsuits filed in the last 5 years over alleged mistreatment of inmates, most of whom were mentally ill. Some 40% of those lawsuits involve suicides in local jails, 135 deaths, and 30 attempts. Unfortunately, this obviously goes back to the case of Kalief Browder. We obviously can see from his case, he went through a lot of PTSD, he went through a lot of trauma. Just the fact that he came through the foster care system automatically exposes him to some form of mental health illness because depression is considered a mental health illness. And then who knows whatever else came with that baggage, you know what I'm saying? So it's crazy that by the time he was basically 22, he had already attempted more than once to commit suicide. And then obviously by the time he was 22, unfortunately, he did complete that act, taking his own life. Of the 165 jail suicides and attempts, about 80% of inmates were awaiting trial. So that's huge right there because you basically, by the Constitution, are promised a quick and speedy trial. But if we're looking at just Rikers Island alone, the average person is sitting there for 8 months to about a year, never knowing what their case is going to be. It's like when you're a kid, right? I'm gonna bring it back to like another example from like when we were kids and stuff like that. When your parent was mad because you did something or whatever, the worst part of them getting mad was not the beating, but the anticipation of the beating. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you know your mom's is about to pull out the chancleta, you would rather she just hit you with the chancleta right now. But that stress gets heightened when your mom is like, like, you know what I'm saying? Like she's she's waiting. She's waiting for the moment. Like, she's just building up the anxiety for you to, like, fear the chancleta. You know what I'm saying? But instead of just being merciful and just hitting you right there in that moment, sometimes they'll hold it. They'll hold the punishment, and they'll make sure that you suffer a little bit before you get hit. It's the same thing over here in regards to, you know, about 80% of inmates who are awaiting trial when they committed suicide or attempted it. It's like, if I'm gonna do my time, let me just do it. You know what I'm saying? But in a lot of cases, it's almost a torture in itself to keep somebody waiting when you only have so much life anyways. It's like, if I'm gonna do my time, just let me do it and let me go back to my community and let me go back to my family. But some people are there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and for no reason. In Khalif Browder's case, he was waiting for 3 years and he never got found guilty. You know what I'm saying? So this is just an unfortunate reality in the system. And then these lawsuits represent a tiny fraction of the problem. An exclusive 50-state reporting effort to collect data, collect recent data found more than 300 suicides in local jails from 2015 to 2017 in just 9 states. So obviously we could continue to go down the line and et cetera, et cetera.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can't they, like, those who waiting for trial, can't they, like, demand their constitutional right to a speedy trial, or they just won't listen?
You said it, if they can what?
Like, say this is, like, demand that they get a speedy trial and say that it's my constitutional right to have a speedy trial.
Right.
Can they do that, or no?
Well, they're supposed to get a speedy trial, but oftentimes it's denied. So that's why, like, in Khalif's case, when he sued the city, you know what I'm saying, he ended up, even though obviously he was no longer around for it, but he ended up getting the settlement because that constitutional right was violated, you know, the right to a speedy trial, which is supposed to be guaranteed to every American, but for whatever reasons, you know, these individuals are kept for months at a time, sometimes years, without ever being convicted, you know what I'm saying, or being released to the community. So, you know, you're supposed to be provided a speedy trial in general. So pretty much that's it for the class. What I wanted y'all to do on your own time, and I know I said I was gonna end earlier, but I ended up getting on a roll and stuff like that, was check out the videos, look over the different video material that I put in the syllabus in regards to mental health and suicides and stuff like that. I don't know if any of y'all listen to rap or if y'all know Casanova. He actually had a song where he was talking about suicide and stuff like that. And the rap song basically just breaks it down really perfectly. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody is thinking behind the wall and why they're thinking it and stuff like that. So, you know, definitely check out those links. Check out especially the one for the mental health, which I think is like the first link at the top, because that one really gives you a good inside look as to what's going on inside of prisons in regards to mental health and stuff like that. But I'm gonna stick around if anybody got any questions or comments, you know what I'm saying. But in the meantime, you know, enjoy your day. Before y'all leave, let me get a you. Let's count it down again. Let's count it down like how we did last time. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. I heard y'all.
Real ghetto for them.
Hey, listen, man.
I love it.
Listen, man. I ain't used the hood shows me, man. That's what it is. Listen, but enjoy y'all day. In the meantime, if you got any questions, you know what I'm saying, y'all know how to reach me. I'll stick around for a couple minutes if y'all want to ask anything.
Thank you.
You too, Professor.
Take care.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Sure. Yeah, as well.
Bye, Professor.
All right, man. Have a good one. Stay safe.
All right, thanks. You too.
Hi, Professor. This is Ali.
Hey, how you doing, Ali?
Good, good. How are you?
Chilling, you know.
I have a question. The 10 reflections that we're supposed to do, actually, I done a couple of them, more than half of them. Can I submit them all at one shot?
You're more than welcome to, but what I would say is, you know, I mean, if you already read over the material and went over this stuff, you're more than welcome to, because the questions are already posted online for y'all. So
Okay.
it's pretty much up to you at that point. But you know, sometimes I might throw a little extra stuff, you know,
Right.
in the lectures or whatever. But if
Right.
you answer the questions directly based off of the materials or whatever, then you'll be all right.
Right. And the essay I'm talking about, the essay can be any one of those topics from the syllabus, or I know you said if you want to do something else, you just let you know before we do it. Is that right?
Yeah, it could be anything from the syllabus, and like you said, if there's a topic that you want to explore that's not on the syllabus, you know,
Right.
just let me know.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much, Professor. Take care.
Definitely, you as well.
Thank you.
Y'all got any questions for me? Yeah, I'm gonna end this call right here. If y'all got any questions, comments, you know how to reach me. Enjoy your day in the meantime.